Maneva na sema PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV de osia dem yopo.
Memo bibiara kwa aba eba PENDREAM TV. So we new to the channel, subscribe to the channel, bell notification no. Na share ma afofro esa enkebi. Now, it's not how long you live in power. Nemo near what it to me no ebeyano. It tells everything about you. Ema umamfo ehunu eya with direction. Ene afen so no. Say the two me share one sa near ubetumi aye. NPP amanyoku no etna eye Ghana akunya kese so for 8 solid years. Now the dollar was exchanging around 16 cedis. NDC amanyoku no ebetna Ghana akunya kese so no. Just 1 year and year, the dollar is exchanging at 10 cedis, 11 cedis. And no, and Kwesi Pratt Jr. are commending a President Jandam for the outstanding performance. Sami Janvi, Atoforsen, and the cabinet, and answer one now. Was surrounding President Jandam or Mobo Ejumakesia. Yeah, a few days back, Oka said they are cooking the delicious meal. Now he is only the one in front, and I said the one serving the meal. Now say Yabo Abaswa. Yam commended or more share a various offices or more ye edumason. Now Kwesi Pratt Jr. I roasted and I said I blasted a Dr. Bawumia and the offense to the NPP Amanyokuno. Efa almost Sambia almost said NPP initiative. The gold reserve now almost started and I supported President Jandam ne NDC Amanyokuna or achieve a outstanding performance in this 1 year. And a Kwesi Pratt Jr. just and your ferry and I say and your NPP for ferry. Say Omoka in some way. Now this is just propaganda. Now if this is the case, a wicked idea and MPP at the air to journal. Now why is it that within 8 years, one casawo idea and to me and ye Juma and Boa Ghana and the affairs no party. Name after say we're free a year office. Ya obi abegistia now. Or steer the country into the right direction. I find mum and I will comment and say, initiatives and I direct Ghana into the right directions. And I say, this administration to get these numbers are almost in terms of the economy. And some way, and some who be a Kwesi Pratt Jr. and to Abra now or China drain after the first anniversary of President Jandam the government. Yeah, or commended President Jandam for outstanding performance. And then after or blasted a NPP Amanyokuno for throwing propaganda said among numbers and as among initiatives and Ama President Jandam again these numbers. Yentie send a Kwesi Pratt Jr.
It is clearly against the provisions of the Constitution and does not allow for inclusion. You see, this whole idea that every national event ought to be seen as a religious event, not just religious event, but Christian event, in which people are encouraged to wear white garments and sometimes to kneel before all kinds of priests and so on, is exceedingly nauseating. You see, because these kinds of celebrations exclude sections of society from participating in national celebrations. But when it comes to the question of freedom of religion, it is not about numbers. It's about the essence, about belief and so on. It's about conscience and all, So I'm getting increasingly worried that gradually there appears to be a deliberate effort to Christianize everything Ghanaian, especially things that ought to involve all of us. And I think that we need to pay attention to this. I've seen the statistics. The statistics which conclude that Ghana is a Christian country because Christians outnumber other religious believers and so on. But if you subject that statistics to any serious analysis, you will find that it is not true. Now, why do I say this? You see, if you go to people's homes and you ask them, what is your religion? And they tell you, that I'm a Muslim, or I'm a Christian, or whatever, Baha'i, or whatever, you need to ask further questions in order to establish true religious identity. Listener, you and I know that all of the many people who profess to be Christians and so on, when it comes to things like marriage, child naming and so on, they practice African traditional religion. So if you take all of that into account, practitioners of African traditional religion may outnumber other religions as well. But for me, that is not even the point. These events ought to be secular, in order that everybody who is Ghanaian can participate in it. You understand? And that comes from the Constitution, which describes Ghana as a secular state. That's my first point. Now, all the assessments I've seen about the performance of the Mahama administration in the first year have been positive, excepting hardcore NPP advocates. Now, you've seen the surveys. And in fact, Global Info Analytics, which actually doesn't give Mahama the highest score, places the Mahama administration at 67%. That's close to 70%. That's a very, very high score. In fact, last week, on this very platform, one of the Greater Accra communication gurus of the New Patriotic Party, Sabu, was on this platform. And in his submission, he said that, look, he knows that the vast majority of Ghanaians disagree with his analysis that the Mahama administration has not done well. He said it. He said he knows that most Ghanaians think that Mahama has done well, but in his opinion, he thinks that Mahama has not done well. No problem. What are we to believe? What the vast majority of Ghanaians believe, or what a tiny minority believes? What is significant? You understand? We have to make that decision, for ourselves. Now, I've seen a statement attributed to Mr. Kwame Pienim. Now, what is significant is that Mr. Kwame Pienim is a founding member of the New Patriotic Party. Besides being a founding member of the New Patriotic Party, he's also a respected local and international economist. And his verdict is that the Mahama administration has done exceedingly well in the management of the national economy. You understand? I've seen other comments attributed to Mr. Ishmael Yamson, who is not a member of the NDC, and who in the Ghanaian business community is highly respected. And his position is that the Mahama administration has done exceedingly well, and so on. So this is the background we must come from. Now, given all of these ratings, what should we make of them? Now, the point I'd like to make simply is that one, the Mahama administration has not effected any significant paradigm shift when it comes to the management of the economy. There's been no seismic shift. The national economy, the paradigm that the NPP left is still the paradigm that we are working with. Indeed, the 3-year IMF program is still the one in force. Okay? But something must have changed for us to get the results that we are getting. There's no paradigm shift. We are still following the neo-colonial, neoliberal path to development. And yet, the results are different. What is it that accounts for the result, the difference in the results? And I'd like to submit clearly that what accounts for this difference in results is discipline, a very, very high level of discipline in the management of the national economy. what accounts for this change is prudence in the management of public resources and so on. Now, with discipline and prudence in the management of public resources, look at the gains we have made over the last 12 months. Now, that should suggest to us that if we add a significant paradigm shift, this economy can really become robust if we do that. Now, I listened to some of my friends from the New Patriotic Party. And, Senna, I can't help laughing when I listen to them. When I listen to them, I just can't help laughing. Say that, well, there have been some good things in the Mahama administration, but all of these good things came from Dr. Bawumia's ideas. Senna, Dr. Bawumia and the NPP were in power for 8 years. For those 8 years, his ideas didn't work at all. As soon as he left office, his ideas started working. What story is that? And they don't feel ashamed. They look us in the face and they tell us this. That yes, inflation has come down, the value of the cedi has appreciated and so on, but all of this must be attributed to the brilliant ideas of Dr. Bawumia, who was in office for 8 long years. The ideas of Dr. Bawumia must be very wicked ideas. I mean, the ideas don't like Dr. Bawumia. They didn't work when he was in power. When he left office, they started working. What is this story? In any case, Senna, look, let's look at the figures. Because the figures speak volumes when it comes to the microeconomic situation. NPP took inflation to 54%. They left office with inflation at 23%. If I lie, just tell me that I lie. Okay? They managed to take inflation, boom, to 54%. Then brought it down to 23%. At the time, 23 point something percent, at the time they were leaving office. Massa, within 12 months, the Mahama administration has brought inflation down from 23 point something percent to 5.4%. Is there a dispute about this? There's no dispute. Okay? No dispute. You come to the value of the city. They manage, through the brilliant ideas of Dr. Bawumia, to take it all the way to 17 cedis to $1. At the time they were leaving office, it was hovering around 15 point something to $1. In 1 year, one single year, the Mahama administration has brought it down to 10.4 to $1. And you say, nothing has happened. How can you look at this and say that nothing has happened? The national debt has fallen drastically in 1 year. And you say nothing has happened. But no problem. They then go on to say that, look, yes, it is true that some prices have come down. They mentioned petroleum prices and so on. But that electricity tariffs have shot up. Oh my goodness. My brother, go and look at the stabilization agreement that the New Patriotic Party government led by Nana Akufo-Addo signed with the IMF. They agreed that electricity tariffs should be increased. The decision to increase electricity tariffs was not made by the Mahama administration, but by the New Patriotic Party administration. And the records are there. You understand? They decided that the tariffs should be increased. Not just electricity and water tariffs should be increased. And this is because at the time they were leaving office, the power sector alone was indebted to the tune of over $3 billion. That was the level of indebtedness of the power sector. And in the estimation, that debt could only be retired by increasing tariffs. Okay? Now, we are being told by President Mahama that indeed this last stabilization agreement with the IMF should be the very last one, and that we shouldn't go back to it. I hope he keeps his word, because we've heard it over and over again. When Nana Akufo-Addo came to power, the promise was that we will never go back to the IMF, and so on. At the time they were going back to the IMF, it was like a hurricane was pushing them towards the IMF, and so on. So we've heard these statements over and over again, why they won't go back to the IMF and so on. We want to believe that. Now, Senna, I'm one person who has always indicated strongly that the macroeconomic indicators are not a sufficient indication of the health of an economy. And I mean it. Because I've always said that these are statistical averages. And statistical averages do not tell the full story. So, for example, when you make the point that the gross national income has increased in a particular year, what are you saying? You're saying that if you put together all the incomes and you divide it by the national population, this is what you get. Now, it is possible, statistically, to have 90% of the population have declining incomes, with only 10% getting increasing incomes, and that could lead to a substantial increase in the So these are averages. So for me, it is not sufficient to depend on these macroeconomic indicators. They are indicators, all right. They tell a certain story, but they don't tell the full story. And that has always been my position. Now, there is this talk about unemployment. At the NPP's press conference, they said, look, the unemployment problem has not been resolved. How can the unemployment problem be resolved in 1 year when at the time you were leaving office, you signed a binding agreement with the IMF that public sector employment should be frozen? That the government should not employ anybody. You signed an agreement that the government should not employ anybody before you left office. The agreement is due to expire, I think, this month or next month or so. So how can you be expecting government to be employing people when you have already committed the incoming government to a program which says the government should not employ people? I cannot understand it. Maybe you can. But I cannot. This is a commitment that you made that don't employ people. You see, there's a certain development that I'm increasingly getting worried about. We have trained a number of nurses, many nurses. Now we have come to the conclusion that our economy cannot absorb these nurses, and therefore we are exporting these nurses to other countries. What we are actually doing is that we are subsidizing other economies. Because we have spent huge amounts of money to train these nurses. We've invested in the training of the nurses and so on. And we are giving them to other countries. It means that those countries will not have to spend so much money training their nurses. It's a subsidy to those countries. And I find that exceedingly repugnant. This exportation of medical personnel is repugnant. It's repugnant because we need them here. Look, access to healthcare is very poor. The statistics are there. I don't have the statistics readily at hand, but the statistics are there. Access to healthcare is very poor. We need to improve healthcare in this country. We need to open more, clinics and hospitals. We need to open, what do they call them? Chip compounds and so on. We need to ensure that every community has a certain number of nurses and so on. We can deploy these nurses if we judiciously, harness and apply national resources. Okay, so I'm completely opposed to this senseless policy of exporting nurses. I mean, people in government today are jubilating because they are able to export nurses. It doesn't solve our health problems. It doesn't solve the problem of unemployment and so on. We need to be imaginative, more imaginative than we are, today. Sana, what is the fundamental problem, fundamental problem confronting the Ghanaian economy? The fundamental problem confronting the Ghanaian economy is that we do not own our national resources, and our national resources are not being exploited for the benefit of the people of Ghana. That's the fundamental problem. And that fundamental problem has not been tackled yet. And I haven't heard anybody speak to tackling that. One of my greatest disappointments in the work of the Constitutional Review Committee is that they went about talking about things that don't matter. Reduce the age of the president from 40 to 30 years. So what? What would that do? Add one more year to the term of the president. What problem does that address and so on? The fundamental problem is control of our natural resources and how to exploit these natural resources for the benefit of the people of Ghana. If the Constitutional Review Committee had addressed this problem, I would be upstanding and applauding them because they would have done something, provided a provision which would deal practically with a problem which is impeding our development. They didn't do that. Sana, many of us, I was going to say all of us, but I'm cautious. There are some people who don't agree with us, have come to the conclusion that Africa can only leap forward into a future of prosperity if we unite. African unity is a prescription for economic advancement. It's a prescription for a collective self-defense and so on. This Constitutional Review Committee made no provision about Ghana's commitment to African unity. And I recall that in the 1960 Constitution, there was a provision in that Constitution which said that Ghana should be ready to sacrifice its sovereignty for the collective sovereignty of Africa. And so, it is not in this amendment. So what is this amendment that they are putting before us? You understand? Now, some have mentioned this Constitutional Review as one of the successes of the Mahama administration. Well, I don't know, you understand? But I'm going to raise a caution today. There are so many changes which have been prescribed by this Constitutional Review Committee, so many changes. Perhaps more than 50, if you count, far more than 50 and so on. Now, if you have a referendum on a new constitution which simply says that let's go and vote yes or no, the result will be absolutely meaningless because the changes are many. So if you vote yes, does it mean that you subscribe to all of the recommendations which have been made? So I want to see if we have to go to a referendum which clearly spells out the different proposals, and citizens then have the right to vote yes for number one and no for number two, and yes for number three. That's the only way it will make sense. Because I've had the experience of 1992, or is it 91, when the current constitution was submitted for referendum. There were so many people who disagreed with so many provisions in the constitution, but they voted yes. Because they thought that the constitution for multi-party democracy was better than a no constitutional regime, you understand? So we accepted many things which did not make sense and which are haunting us and for which we are calling for constitutional review today. So if there's going to be a referendum, it must be properly, organized. Now, Senna, we are talking about GDP. We are talking about national debt. We are talking about the rate of inflation and so on. Yeah, maybe they're important to talk about. But I want to talk about something else. One of the most refreshing things about the Mahama administration is the quality of leadership. My brother, a couple of days ago, I was sitting in my house. I tuned on the television and I saw something I've never seen before. The president moving from his office in the Flagstaff House, going to the gate and socializing with the gate men and so on, the garden boys, going from office to office, embracing the workers, asking them what their problems are and so on. This is remarkable. Remarkable. Look, there have been presidents who have ruled this country. From their houses, they get to the gate and zoom into the car park and straight to their office. They don't know any other office in that Flagstaff house. Go and check. There's no interaction between them and the very people who work for them, even at the seat of government. This Mahama example is exemplary. He went from office to office, from duty post to duty post. There was one instance on the video where a young girl, everybody was shaking. The young girl was said, why are you afraid of me? And so on. Come and embrace the girl. This is leadership that we want to see. You understand? This is exceptional leadership. Then he has started a media tour of the media houses and so on. I think it's important. It is significant. I was talking to many people who say that access to Mahama is so easy. He's on all the platforms. He's on Facebook, he's on X, he's everywhere. Send a message to him and within minutes he's responding. Accessibility to the president has become very easy and so on. Look, the aesthetics. President, look at him, look at the aesthetics. Look, this may not put food on the table. This may not lead to a radical transformation of anything and so on. But it is pleasing to see that the president can come close to the people. It is pleasing to see a certain level of modesty, and so on. And I find this particularly pleasing. One of the things which has been raised for discussion this morning, and I think it was raised by my brother and friend Richard Ahiagba, is about this so-called third term bid. Of course, my brother, Mr. Ahiagba, makes the point that the president has put that matter to rest. He says he's not interested in a third term. He has also made the point that the party itself, the National Democratic Congress, has said that, look, it is not interested in a third term. But I still like to comment on it. And you know why I like to comment on it? Because it betrays a certain culture. A certain very nauseating culture. A culture which has been responsible for the downfall of many governments, not just in Ghana, but throughout the world. And this is the culture of blatant and stupid sycophancy. Look, President Mahama has a 4-year term. 4-year term is what he has. He has just completed the first year. Second year hasn't come. Third year hasn't come. Fourth year hasn't come. And sycophants are all over the place. He has done so well that he should go for a third term. At least that he finished the third term. You are evaluating him on the basis of just one term out of 4 terms. Are you crazy?
Yeah. 1 year.
1 year. You are evaluating him on the basis of 1 year out of 4 years. And you've already come to the conclusion that he's done so well that he must go for a third term. Abba! What kind of sycophancy is this? I mean, it's nauseating sycophancy. Extremely nauseating sycophancy, But my pleasure. And for those of us who have been watching politics over the last couple of years, since 1992 and so on, there's something which is significant, and it is this. You see, presidents since 1992 have been elected on party tickets. They go into office on the basis of a party program. The moment they're elected, the parties don't matter anymore. They do as they please. They ignore the party, and so on. And it happened a lot in the Akufo-Addo era, and so on. Now something is changing. Now listen and watch. The National Democratic Congress is exerting its influence and insisting that the party line must be followed. This is refreshing. So it is not just us citizens, non-party members and so on, who are insisting that you have to keep your promise. The party itself, the National Democratic Congress, is insisting that President Mahama, we went to the public with this promise and you have to keep the promise. This is the party ethos. These are the party standards, and people in government have to follow these standards. Perhaps if the New Patriotic Party had been strong and able to insist on party standards and so on, perhaps the Akufo-Addo government would not have gone astray. So the way the NDC is carrying itself is so refreshing. So very refreshing. The party is insisting that its agenda must be followed. Its ethos ought to be followed. They may not always be right. But the assumption is that it is the party program who took the government to power. And that the party itself has a responsibility to insist that government follows its program. And I find this so pleasing. So in evaluating the first year of the Mahama administration, I cannot ignore this development in the role of political parties in national governance.
PENDREAM TV now, so far so good. Say open online portal e Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.